Good morning. We are looking at how do I quilt the quilt? What do I do when I sit down to quilt? And we have a unique, beautiful quilt to look at today. This quilt is provided by Debbie, and she took a quilt along that Lisa, and I'm going to spell the word Bongean, did a few years ago and combined it with some hand embroidered angel blocks that she had. And she designed it into her own layout and came up with this wonderful 80 by 84 quilt. The blocks that Lisa did are 6 inches, but Debbie put a half-inch border all around them, so they're a 7-inch block in a layout. And then her angel blocks are pretty much 9.5 by 12, 12.5. So either way they lay, 9.5 by 12.5. So she has these gorgeous blocks in the middle of her quilt. Let's look at a few things a little bit closer so you can see things. Here's an angel block. You can see all the beautiful hand embroidery. I know it probably doesn't come out super on a video looking at a screen already, but these are so cute, and the blocks are wonderful, cute as a button, and they're pretty complicated blocks. Now I have to admit that I did this quilt along with her for a while, but my quilting for people got in the way and I put it down. So hopefully one day I'll be able to finish it. But Debbie does those things, and she does great at doing unique things like this. So here's an embroidery block, and then I'll show you another one. So what are we going to do with this quilt? Let me pull it up for you to look at one more time. So what I would probably do first, quilting over the whole quilt, very few people would even think about that because of the angel blocks with the embroidery. That could cause a big problem. So you probably would want to do something. This quilt I would spend more time on this quilt. It's going to take more because the layout is more complex. So you're going to have, no matter what you do, I was just taking some time on it. And the first thing I would do, I really would, because the way this is laid out, is stitch around the ditch of every piece block and every angel block. Because these are not in just straight seams, or they're all over the place. So because of that, to give yourself freedom, I would stitch in each of those stitches. And then I would come back and look. Let's look at the piece blocks. We can do these different ways. We can stitch, I already said to stitch in the ditch around the outside, but then you can stitch in the ditch around the main perimeter of the block. Now some of these get pretty complicated, but you could come up with just a little bit to stitch in around the main section. Here's another one, the block I just stitched around the outside. Didn't do a whole lot. That's one option. Another option is to get a little bit more involved and do some quilting like we would do on a big quilt with some of these designs. And that would work, but it changes, I think, the feel of this quilt a little bit more. But that's definitely an option, and it would look fine. We can also do a little bit more quilting, but stay pretty classic and pretty simple. Here I just came in around the block, so I would still probably stitch in the ditch, and then I came in and just echoed inside of the blocks and kept it simple. To do some stitching in here, I went in the main section. So remember, these are 6-inch blocks. If you get some stitching in them, you'll be good. We can also do a little bit more. And we could take a block and quilt a feather wreath in it, and I just do a larger circle. You could draw it smaller or draw something inside of that, but you can do a feather wreath in the block. That's totally acceptable and can give some really wonderful appearances. So those are some block ideas. What do I do with the angels? Well, one thing I would think about doing with the angels is to come in just a little bit, if you can, a 1/4 of an inch all the way around. I'm not sure you can on all of them, but you can get a line in there, and I would just do a line myself, and I would do this in the white. Definitely do it in the white so it's completely in the background. And then one option that I would probably do is to just do small little loops all the way around. Now, one thing that I will often do with applique is to echo it. That doesn't completely work with these, especially when you have something like little raindrops or a little bit of wording. But you can always work those little loops in, and just little loops really continues to make this whimsical, because it is whimsical. And so doing it in the same color thread as the background would blend in real good and really get your block solid down, because these are larger. So that's an option. And then I showed it again on a different block so that you could see how you can get that in there, and you can stick these little loops in anywhere. So just simple loops would really, the whimsy would be cute with it. Then let's look at the background quilting on this. What in the world would we do? We have all of these spots in here. Well, remember, I'm hitting all levels of quilting, so we can take loops again and add in stars. These blocks are filled with stars, so adding stars in would be great. I'm showing you here how it would look in a couple of different places. So if you were doing this all over by yourself and you're more towards a beginner or don't want to get into a lot of heavy quilting, these little loopy stars would be great. You can also take, as I've gone through several times, and sometimes I feel like I'm repeating the same designs, but you know, that's what you get with quilting. And you can get a lot of different designs, but there's basic designs that show up in almost every quilt, just like your blocks show up. So you could do the swirls in the background as well. That just might be a little bit heavier, but those would look good. Let's look at some other options. We could take and do, now this would take time because you'd be jumping over all of these blocks, but you can do diagonal lines on this both ways. I didn't try the straight lines, but I don't think I'd like that. I think I'd prefer the diagonal. But get a large grid on the main body of this. Stay inside. She has a 3.5 inch border, I think she said on the out, just the plain white. I would keep your grid on the inside. You can go all the way out, I suppose. I just think of doing things on borders, but you could absolutely go all the way out. She's just going to do a binding after this. But a grid would look great. Let's look at a few more options. We could go in and in open spots, if we're stitching in the ditch around the angels and the piece blocks, we could pick up and stitch around feathers all around this quilt, make them go different ways, and it would be very sweet. And that would be so cute with the feathers all over that. Would look really, really nice. And I really like that. Let's look at the borders. We could throw simple star loops in the border. That would work. That would end it. And it would be very nice. We could also do a little vine with, if you want to keep it a little bit more Christmassy, we can add in some holly, some little splays, change it up a little bit. That would make it more specifically towards Christmas. It's a red and white quilt, but that would work beautifully. And we can get back to feathers again and do a little bit less difficult feather. Just do that a little bended spine, and then come in even with a swirl and just some simple feathers to keep it lighthearted. And you can throw the splays and things in there with that as well. So that would work. That wasn't a very pretty one, I apologize. There we go, something like that. So we could do that with that. So we've covered all of them. What I love on this quilt is I love the loops in the background of the angels, and I love the feather on the pieced blocks. In the backgrounds, I love those random feathers. I also really like the grid, but honestly, I also like, I love the random feathers and I love the grid. And I love the little feather on this side. Move this over. There we go. I love the little simple feather on the side. So some ideas of how to work with a quilt when you have blocks kind of in the way. And this is a wonderful quilt. I love it. Thanks for sharing this with us, Debbie. We're eager to see when you get this done. Have a great day.